Welcome to 10%. Gay suicide has been in the news a lot lately, and we ask ourselves, what drives a young man or woman to take their own life? Could it be religion? Today we speak with the Reverend Anthony Turney. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We've all been shocked and dismayed about the suicides we've been reading about, seeing on TV. We ask ourselves, what would cause someone to do that? And I know we've been talking about it. Do you think sometimes it can be our religious leaders?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the church has to accept a significant amount of responsibility for the kinds of environment that would bring young people to take their lives. I can only imagine what it must be like to be told, as the Pope has said to the Roman Catholic gay community, you are intrinsically disordered. Think about the Mormon Church and some of the more right-wing kinds of churches who say, you know, if you're gay, you're an abomination before God. I'm not sure who they are talking about when they talk about God, because it's not the same God that I know.
Mm-hmm. And your church, for the record, is the Anglican Church, the Episcopal Church.
The Episcopal Church, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how different is that from, you mentioned the Mormons, you mentioned the Roman Catholics. Mm-hmm. I mean, in general, is there a way in which Christian denominations talk about LGBT people that you think is demeaning? Or suicide-producing, potentially?
Well, it depends where you are. I mean, we have the luxury here in the Bay Area of having very liberal religious institutions and communities. That's not so across the broad span of the United States. To the contrary, in fact. What is so troubling, I think, is that if you're a young person and you're kind of questioning your sexuality, and you're being told these awful things, they really strike very deeply, it seems to me, to the kinds of values that when you're very young you're trying to kind of come to terms with. If an institution as important in your life, and particularly in your family's life, is telling you that you that there's something so fundamentally wrong with you, that's just terrible. And contrary, I think, to what the Christian, at least as far as I know it, the Christian message is. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I say, I'm not quite sure who the Jesus is, for instance, who asked us only to do two things. One was to love God, and the other was to love each other and love our neighbors. Not if they happen to be straight. Mm-hmm. But to love everyone. And that seems to me to be a message that the church has now to really reinforce with young people, that they are made in the image of God, that they are loved by God. They don't have to change.
All right. Now, when you were a young man growing up in, I believe it was a small town north of London, Aylesbury,
right. Mm-hmm.
Did you feel loved and accepted by God, and did you know that you were a gay man or a gay boy?
Well, I've been a gay as long back as I can remember, and that's that's a very long time. And actually, the length of those years, I think, has been one of the motivating forces behind my strong reaction to these suicides.
Because I know when we spoke about it just the other day on the street, and you were really impassioned about how the church had to take responsibility for these suicides. I mean, it actually is what led to this program. You were so passionate about the responsibility you felt the church and certain leaders had.
Well, you can't say these things to young, impressionable people who are trying to discover and to come to terms with who they are, and have the church, and I'd say that in very broad terms, but have the church continually tell them that they're going to hell, that they're sinful. Obviously, that's going to have a profound impact on young people. And that has to stop, because it contributes in a major way, I think, to an environment where the unthinkable becomes possible, that young people are so confused, they get bullied, your opening segment, I think, said bullied from the pulpit, and there's an element of truth to that. I just can't get my head wrapped around the fact that young people would be driven by what the church tells them to take their lives.
Okay, now, so you've thrown down the gauntlet. You're here as an openly gay archdeacon in the Episcopal Church. I don't see a lot of straight ministers out there saying this is bad. Why is it that it seems like the water always has to be carried by the gay people within the midst of the church? Why isn't there a non-gay minister standing up? Or maybe there is and I don't know about it.
Well, there are for sure, but precious few. Part of it is what I've been struck by is the campaign about, it does get better. And I think I have a role in saying to young people, along with people who are much more famous than I will ever be, to say to young kids who are gay, dealing with their sexuality, it does get better. But that takes a lot of convincing when you're, face to face with bullying and being demeaned because of simply who you are, who, as I would put it, God made you. God does not make mistakes.
All right, now, were you bullied when you were a young person?
No, I wasn't. I was raised in a little country town, but 65 or so years ago, when I began to explore my sexuality, there was a different environment. I don't think that even the word gay or homosexual was in the, I would never have heard it.
But you weren't called pufta or whatnot on the playground or something like that?
And all the years, and even when I was in the British Army, there were jokes, but not with the meanness that I think we hear today. Certainly not. There was for sure an element of what you might call don't ask, don't tell. And at times it was a struggle, and it did seem lonely, and it did seem like I was some kind of aberration. But the point I want to make is to the young people who are listening to this is that you have to hang in there, and you have to believe that you are not some kind of aberration, that God loves you. You are perfectly made in God's eyes, and don't let anybody try and convince you to the contrary.
So who gave you, or maybe you got it from your family, or just you had the inner fortitude to say, I'm not an aberration, I'm loved of God? When did you first realize, one, you were gay, and two, that you were made, in your words, to your belief, in the likeness of God? When did that strike you?
Well, I think as I began to explore gay culture as it was then in England, which was very hidden but existed, I benefited from people who were sometimes my age now, but who guided me and shepherded me and gave me advice and so on, but in a way nurtured me, and never, ever would tell me that something was wrong with me. So again, growing up is never easy. I don't think for anybody.
Yeah.
And growing up is not something I think that has a definite time frame to it. I always say that I didn't really kind of get it together until I was in my 30s. So, and maybe I'm still figuring out what I'm going to do when I grow up. But it does take time, and it takes a faith and a confidence in who you are. And that, from the pulpit, yes, that's what young people need to hear from the church.
So now you're saying this on TV. This is your pulpit at the moment.
Yes.
Are you going to have an opportunity to talk about this from the pulpit? I know now you're officially retired, but if you had a chance to stand in a pulpit, what message who would you like to be in that audience? Young people or other church leaders?
Well, here in San Francisco, we're really blessed by the existence of places like Grace Cathedral, which is my spiritual home. Because, yes, from the pulpit at Grace Cathedral, I have, on a number of occasions, been able to talk, to preach very frankly about what I believe the role of the church in accepting, I hesitate to use the term including, because that seems to me to suggest that somehow you need to be invited in. And I don't think that's the case at all. So Grace Cathedral is a place where a significant number of the congregation are gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender. In this diocese, as you know, we have a good number of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender clergy.
Which has got to be unusual for a Christian religion, I would think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But speaks volumes about my particular denomination. I have been critical here about other denominations, but my own denomination, the Episcopal Church, has its struggle and continues to have its struggle. For instance, because of the consecration of an openly gay priest to bishop.
Right. There is another struggle you're dealing with now. In our last few moments, and I only say this because I've become aware of it, and I know that you like to use your own life experience for teaching moments, and right now you're facing prostate cancer.
Yes.
What is that like? You've talked about specifically what that's like as a gay man.
Well, one of the things that when I got my diagnosis, which was back in July, one of the things that I quickly realized was that prostate cancer, which is, as you may know, is one of the most virulent and common cancers that men face. I think in this year alone, so almost 200,000 men will get the diagnosis I got. You have prostate cancer, and about 20,000 men will die from the disease. So it's a very significant disease. But what I quickly realized was that prostate cancer in the context of being a gay man was very different than it would be for a straight man, for all kinds of reasons. When you think about the significance of what sexuality is to
a gay man, yes.
Indeed. So partly of what I wanted to say is to kind of come out about it. There are support groups, and particularly here in the Bay Area.
And you found some online.
Yes.
And actually, before we run out of time, you have a phone number.
I do.
And this number is a hotline for? Well,
it's not a hotline so much as it's a gay men's prostate cancer support group. And the number to reach it is 415-353-2503.
And we'll also put that on the Facebook page for this show.
Great.
In our last few moments, what advice would you give, two short ones, to someone else, a gay man specifically facing prostate cancer, and very quickly, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking, my church, my family, my history tells me I have to end my life? What advice would you give to those two groups in our last few moments?
Well, to the gay man facing prostate cancer, to quickly realize that you're not alone. There's significant support out there, and it's not a journey you have to walk alone. To the person, particularly a young person, who's contemplating suicide because of bullying or being told that they're less than human in a way, I would say, hang in there.
Hang in there.
Hang in there, and don't leave.
Don't leave us. We'll be back. We've been speaking with Reverend Anthony Turney. Next up, our conversation with Frontrunners International. We'll be back.